Do you think it would be helpful for Karmelo Anthony to take the stand in this case? Day 3 of testimony is now complete in the Karmelo Anthony murder trial, and yes, testimony did stretch into the weekend. The prosecution has officially rested its case, and the defense has begun presenting their own witnesses. And we did get to hear a slightly different version of the events that happened under that Memorial High School tent. As always, I am a certified law nerd, bona fide non-attorney. This is not legal advice, just my interpretation of what I've been reading across several media reports. Let's begin. Before we get started, I wanted to quickly address a question I've seen a few times in the comments. Some people have asked why I tend to refer to Anthony by his last name and Austin by his first name. The reason is actually pretty simple. Austin and Hunter are twin brothers and they share the same last name. Because testimony in this case sometimes involves both of them, using Austin and Hunter helps me avoid confusion when I'm breaking down witness testimony. So if you hear me say Austin instead of Metcalf, that's the reason. Day 3 began with the prosecution calling another 17-year-old memorial track athlete. This witness testified that he was under the memorial tent on the day of the stabbing. He said he looked around, looked back, and saw someone he didn't recognize as a teammate. According to this witness, Anthony was not wearing memorial gear, and that immediately stood out to him. He then testified that Anthony repeatedly said things like, "Touch me and see what happens." When prosecutors asked whether he believed Anthony was trying to provoke Austin, the witness answered yes. The witness testified that Austin responded by putting his hand on Anthony's shoulder. When prosecutors asked if there was any reason for Anthony to stab Austin, the witness said no. When asked when Anthony was acting in self-defense, the witness responded, "No, that's lethal force against non-lethal force." On cross-examination, defense attorney Toby Shook focused on prior statements. The witness acknowledged previously describing Austin as having a larger, broader build. He also acknowledged that in an earlier statement, he described Austin placing his hand on Anthony's shoulders as more of a warning, explaining, "Actions speak louder than words." The next witness was a freshman at the time of the incident. He testified that Anthony was asked multiple times to leave the memorial tent and refused. According to this witness, Anthony responded by saying, "Make me leave." When prosecutors asked who was instigating, the witness answered, "Karmelo." On cross-examination, the defense focused heavily on the physical contact immediately before the stabbing. The witness testified that Austin walked over to Anthony, who he believed was still seated. When asked whether Austin grabbed him or pushed him, the witness testified that Austin pushed him in the shoulder area with both hands. The witness later testified that Austin was trying to force Anthony out because, in his words, they, quote, "didn't have any other choice." When prosecutors later asked whether he believed the stabbing was self-defense or murder, the witness answered, "This was murder." Another memorial student then took the stand. This witness testified that after Anthony was asked to leave, Anthony became increasingly confrontational. According to this witness, Anthony responded, "F you all, I'm not going to leave, you're all a bunch of pussies." The witness testified that Anthony put his hand in his backpack and repeatedly said, "Touch me and see what happens." This witness testified that Anthony repeated that statement 5 times. According to this witness, Austin's response was, "I'm not going to touch this guy." The witness described Austin as calm. When asked for his opinion, the witness testified, "My opinion is Austin didn't deserve what happened." Now, one of the most significant witnesses of the day was a memorial athlete who knew both Austin and Anthony. According to his testimony, he knew Anthony through Anthony's ex-girlfriend and was also a close friend of Austin. This is the witness many reports have referred to as Eddie. He testified that when he saw Anthony under the memorial tent, they greeted each other and dabbed each other up. That testimony is important because it supports one of the defense's themes that Anthony was not a complete stranger to everyone under that tent. However, the witness also testified that things quickly became tense. According to him, Austin approached Anthony and asked, "Who are you?" The witness testified that Anthony became defensive and responded, "You'll have to move me." He also testified that Austin placed a hand on Anthony's back and that he then saw Anthony's hand go into the backpack. One detail from this testimony stood out to me personally. The witness said, "We're at a track meet. I wouldn't expect anything to be in there." According to this witness, Anthony then said, "Touch me, you'll have to move me and find out." The witness described those statements as Anthony trying to provoke Austin. Later, during cross-examination, the defense showed photographs of the witness and Anthony together at social gatherings, including birthday parties and other group events. The defense appeared to be trying to establish that the witness knew Anthony better than he had initially suggested, and the witness acknowledged, "We were cool with each other," but he maintained that they were not especially close friends. This same witness also provided one of the more detailed accounts of the verbal exchanged before the stabbing. According to his testimony, both boys exchanged insults. The witness testified that after one of those comments, Austin responded, "You don't have anything in there." The witness then testified that Austin shoved Anthony, though he described it as not being a hard shove. That testimony stood out because it adds another layer to the confrontation and suggests that the verbal exchange was not entirely one-sided. After the student witnesses finished testifying, prosecutors called the Collin County medical examiner to the stand. Before the testimony began, prosecutors warned the courtroom that the details and photographs would be graphic and advised anyone who did not wish to see or hear that testimony to leave. Austin's family chose to step out of the courtroom before the testimony began. Now, according to some courtroom reporters, Austin's father initially appeared reluctant to leave, but the prosecutors encouraged him to step out, and he ultimately did before the testimony started. Several family members reportedly left with him. The jurors remained in the courtroom and were shown photographs while the medical examiner explained her findings. According to her testimony, the knife penetrated Austin's heart. She described the wound as having approximately 2 inches of what she referred to as, quote, gaping. She explained that a gaping wound differs from a narrow slit-style wound because the tissue separates, creating a wider opening. The ME testified that the knife entered the chest cavity, pierced the heart, and created a wound that was not survivable. When prosecutors asked whether Austin could have survived the injury, her answer was simple: no. According to the courtroom reporters, several jurors appeared emotional during this testimony, and some reportedly covered their mouths while viewing the photographs. The medical examiner ultimately classified Austin Metcalf's death as a homicide. Once the medical examiner finished testifying, the state officially rested its case. Immediately afterward, the defense moved for what is called a directed verdict. If you've never heard that term before, it's basically the defense asking the judge to end the case before it ever reaches the jury because they believe the prosecution has failed to present enough evidence to meet its burden. Courtroom reporters stated that the judge immediately denied that motion. After recess, the defense began. Their first witness was Centennial High School football and track coach Adam Linwood. Linwood testified that track culture is very different from football culture. According to him, track meets are more relaxed. Athletes interact with students from other schools, and he was not aware of any policy prohibiting students from entering another team's tent area. He also testified that Anthony was known as Mello, had been elected football captain by his teammates, and was a starting defensive back. The defense also introduced testimony regarding a significant shoulder injury Anthony suffered during football season that required surgery. Linwood testified that on the day of the incident, Centennial's team tent was not on the morning bus, even though Anthony needed to arrive early for events. And one thing that stood out to me about today's testimony is that the defense did manage to land some effective points. For the first time, jurors heard testimony suggesting that athletes routinely spent time under other schools' tents and that doing so was not necessarily unusual. The defense's second witness, an 18-year-old Centennial graduate, reinforced that point. He testified that making friends across schools was a normal part of track. When asked whether he spent time under other schools' tents, he answered yes. When asked whether he had ever been inside the memorial tent before, he again answered yes. The defense then asked whether it was just him, and his response was, "Me and Karmelo. We both had friends at Memorial." He testified that they had previously spent about 10 minutes there without any problems. So the defense appears to be pushing back on one of the prosecution's recurring themes that Anthony was somewhere he had no business being. What I found interesting, however, is that the prosecution seemed to be prepared for that testimony, because no matter which defense witness took the stand, the prosecutors kept coming back to the same question: why was there a knife at a track meet? The coach agreed there was no reason for an athlete to have a knife at a track meet. The Centennial graduate agreed that there was no reason for an athlete to have a knife at the track meet. And so, while the defense may have raised questions about tent culture and whether students routinely socialized across schools, the prosecution appeared determined to keep the jury focused on the knife. Generally speaking, criminal defense attorneys are often very cautious about putting their defendants on the stand because it opens the door to cross-examination from the prosecution that typically doesn't work out in a defendant's favor. But this case feels a little different. Right now, the jury has heard from first responders, police officers, coaches, medical experts, and a long list of student witnesses. Most of those witnesses who were Memorial High School athletes, were close to Austin, or were experiencing this from the lens of people who were close to Austin and Hunter Metcalf. What the jury has not heard is Karmelo Anthony's version of events. Only Karmelo can tell the jury what he was thinking, what he perceived, what he believed was going to happen in those seconds leading up to the stabbing, and ultimately why he decided to react the way that he did. Now, whether that'll help him or hurt him, that's the bigger question. So I want to know your thoughts. Do you think Karmelo Anthony should take the stand, or do you think he should sit this one out, as it'll only be detrimental to him? I'll be reading through your comments. And as always, I'll continue to follow the testimony and bring you trial updates as this trial moves forward. I'll catch you in the next one.